Welcome to the Maximize Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome back to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their business. This episode is part of our series called Tales from the 17% Club. As we've said over and over again, 83% of attempted business transactions fail to reach the finish line, meaning that only 17% are successful. Now, in this series, we interview people who have successfully exited their business. We call them the 17% Club, to learn more about the process and to hear some interesting stories along the way. You aren't going to be disappointed today, I assure you. In fact, I think what we have here is a double 17%er. So in this episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Tom Washington, who was an owner and chief financial officer of Texas Engineering Systems, a business that was sold in 2010. But that was Tom's second exit. His first was in 1998, which is where we'll start in just a second. Now, Tom's story is a little different on the exit that he did in 2010, but it's absolutely worth sharing here because every business transaction is different. It takes on a life of its own. Now, you'll understand more about that as we walk through the podcast. Tom is currently a partner at B2B CFO, which we'll also talk about toward the end of this podcast. And I've known Tom for several years through Business Navigators, the servant leadership organization that you've heard mentioned here before. Now, when we get to the end of this podcast, we're going to learn some very interesting things about Tom's name. So you want to stay tuned the whole time. When Tom shared his journey with me about his exits and his business experiences, I knew he had to be a guest here on this podcast. So welcome to Maximize Business Value, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
It's good to finally be able to connect with you here. Let's start with your first exit first, shall we? Tell us a little bit about the first company that you exited in 1998. I want to hear a little bit about the backstory, how that company started and how it progressed.
Well, in 1993, I was with Coopers & Lybrand in their national real estate and banking practice, and spent a very fast 4 years working through the RTC bailout and the FSLIC mess, and saw a lot of wealth created. And I thought, maybe I need to get some of that, and it's time to look at forming a business. I've always been active in the community, and through my community activities, I had met a young engineer who was in the telecommunications industry, who was also interested in leaving a very high position at one of the large Dallas telecom giants, and maybe also going out on his own. And so we met and talked and got to know each other, and said, yeah, let's go start a business. And we had an idea to go put together a business to fill a need. And every successful business has to fill a need. And the need that was coming up for this particular business was the FCC was in the process of auctioning off all of the new digital wireless frequencies that we now use every day with our digital wireless phones. And a lot of people were very interested in the frequencies, and many telecommunications giants were successful at getting some of the frequencies and getting some of the large license areas in the country. We knew that under the terms of the frequencies that they had a very fast 4 years to get a high percentage of their network up and running in order to hold on to the licenses. Now, the licenses had a very, very high cost. I mean, in the tens, sometimes hundreds of millions just to have the frequency from the government. And you lost all of that if you didn't hit this criteria and get your network to the prescribed percentage in time. So we knew that if we put together a company that could serve those companies and provide them with key services, that we would do quite well. And so we formed a company called COM 2000 Plus, Communications in the Year 2000 Plus. And we formed this in 1993. And we got together in my partner's living room, and we formed a company, self-capitalized, bootstrapped, to use the current term. And we started immediately to lease an office over on Dallas Parkway to go and start recruiting to put our team together, and also to figure out what our bid package was going to look like and how we were going to put ourselves together. We got some other key people involved. When we started the company, there were 5 partners involved in it, and we were all equal. One of the lessons that I will give, and it's contrary to the lessons I've heard from some other business owners, is if you want to have a long-term partnership, you got to be equal. You can have a kingpin, but if you do, I think the kingpin maybe ends up at the end with the company, but a lot of the dominoes fall along the way. And we needed everybody to pull together in this company to make it successful. So we went out and put our team together, put our credentials together, and very quickly won some big deals with some real giants in the telecommunications industry. Okay, now you got it. Now you got to serve it. And we quickly had one of our partners fall by the wayside, so now we were down to 4.
I have to ask, when you set it up, were you all then 5 equal partners, 20?
Yes, we were.
Okay. All right. And so one of the partners fell by the wayside.
One of the partners fell by the wayside. So now we were 25.
Okay. Now, did you all buy out that other partner, or did he just?
We did.
Oh.
We did. And, we had a very good buyout agreement in the partnership agreement that we worked out. We were organized as an LLC. But that buyout, as other buyouts that came along, were all kind of negotiated on the fly.
Right.
So even though we had a buyout agreement in the partnership agreement, because we were equal and we were all pulling along and doing what we needed to do, we were a very close group. And so the growth started. We were working with Nortel and Ericsson, 2 of the giants. We're working with Nortel Kala down in the Caribbean. We're working with Hughes Network Systems with Southeastern Bell. We were working with PCS Primeco, which if you know that group, they kind of went away. We're working with PageNet. We were working with AirTouch. We had a huge contract with Pacific Bell. We were doing what we did. We were doing 100% of all of that work that was available in California and Nevada, because we had the contracts for several companies. Well, now I got to do income tax returns in 14 states, and we were also in 6 countries. We had engineers outside of the U.S. working on things as well. The company exploded. It grew fast. In 1997, we won a top 10 Dallas 100 for fast growth. And we also, the same year, won a Pacesetter 25 and a Fast Tech 50, which is now the Tech Titans 50. So we won all 3 awards that year, as you might imagine, with a top 10 company. And literally, that was 3 years into the company. We were hitting those kinds of numbers. We had a big payroll. We had a lot of interesting customers. We were doing work that was satisfactory and valuable to those customers. We were helping Nextel here in Dallas with their design of the network that somebody bought at some point. I forget who acquired that one. But we were becoming very visible in the digital wireless telecommunications industry worldwide.
That is amazing. I mean, that kind of growth, and to hit those fast growth awards. I've been a Dallas 100 list. I was on the Tech Titans, and prior the Fast 50, I think they called it, 6 times. I was on the what is the Inc. 5000, a number of times, but
yeah, we never applied for that one.
all of those things bring notoriety to the business too, right? I mean, they suddenly you're getting all kinds of good press about that. All right, so now you're down to 4. You left the company in '98. How many partners were there in that time?
Well, we lost another gentleman after about a year and a half in, so we were down to 3. And we just split it up into thirds. Okay. And for most of the history going forward, then it was just the 3 of us.
Okay, awesome. Now, I mean, the thing's blowing and going, doing great. And you exited, if I understand correctly, you exited as a partner, and the company, stayed intact, but you just exited as a partner. What precipitated that?
Well, we were going great guns. We never had any debt, never needed it. We operated off of our cash flow. We didn't spend more than we had. And, eventually we ran out of the 4 years. And the 4 years was the time that all of these license holders had to get their networks up to speed and get them to a certain percentage. Now, we knew at that point that they would slow down the increase in the networks and take a breathing space, because they will have spent a lot of capital dollars at this point. And so we knew that we had to add some lines of business in order to continue with our fast growth. We looked at acquisitions ourselves, and we did acquire a business telephone systems company out of Fort Worth. We also formed a property management company, which was kind of interesting. You'd look at that and say, what the heck would you do with a property management company? Well, we decided to master lease a building for our office, and we took far more square footage than we needed. And then we rented it out and put together an executive suites business, so that we were subsidizing all of our office space. And it gave us room for expansion, because as it turned out, the tenants, every so often, a tenant wanted to move out, and it would coincide when we needed to take extra space. We also put together a travel agency business, and our wives were active in the travel agency, and that allowed us to, at that point, they were earning fees, to get our guys every week where they needed to go, control the travel, and also make some money in the travel agency. So we were trying to put together a consolidated business where we had a lot of ways to earn. The business telephone systems allowed us to install telephone systems all over the DFW area and other places. And of course, the guys we had were very good at that. Plus, we also had some other techs from that additional business. But all that to say that when we got to this point, we were looking at, well, do we sell the business? We had a huge civil engineering firm in California that wanted to acquire us. And why California? Well, we had a lot of business out there, as I talked about earlier. And this was a large civil engineering firm that had been in business for a long time. They wanted to give us executive positions, board positions, and acquire the business. Ultimately, I was the one that didn't think that was necessarily a good move. We looked at several other options, and I was always the guy that said, well, I don't think this is it. Well, eventually, I saw that my two other partners wanted to do some of these things. I didn't. So it was time to let those guys go and do what they wanted to do. And we worked out a very amenable split. I took the property management company, since real estate was my expertise, and a lot of the liquid assets, and went my merry way. They moved out of the building because I kept the property management, so that meant I kept the office. They went and relocated over near Jupiter and Coit, got a larger facility. The business that they ended up pursuing was a business where they bought a huge microwave network that was for sale in the Northwest United States. And some of the guys had expertise in the long distance industry. And they thought that there was money to be made long term in providing this microwave relay network for the long distance community in the Northwest United States. They renamed the company. They started hiring more people, and of course continuing our core business. And for a while, they were doing very well. For about 2 or 3 years, they had some very good growth, but they didn't really replace my expertise in the business. And they took on debt to buy the network that they were buying. And one dark night, the bank decided to take all the liquid accounts and close down the debt, because some of their customers were in bankruptcy, being the big long distance companies. And that put this company in bankruptcy as well.
Oh, goodness. Well, it sounds like little doubting Thomas, by the way. It's not lost on me, because, we shared the first name of these other opportunities. Sounds like you may have gotten out at the right time.
Well, I wasn't willing to go along with some of the other ideas. I just didn't see that we were going to create the same kind of value and wealth that we created in the companies to date.
Well, I got to tell you, you did so many things right. I mean, you mentioned already that you guys had a buy sell, that you had the equal partnership, but I mean, somebody was in charge, right? And but that you guys worked out amicably. 5 partners down to 4, and then there were 3, and then there were 2, right? And you were able to handle all of those transactions with available cash and resources and other things. So I applaud you guys for doing a lot of things right in the first place. And I applaud your market timing genius there to leave before the implosion, I guess, of the business. Does it, we'll move on to your other company, but does the business still survive today?
No, it's completely gone and liquidated.
So when it was bankruptcy chapter 7, is that right?
Yeah, essentially. Now I'm friends with my ex-partners. I see them from time to time. One of my ex-partners, he went back to the company he left and went very high up into senior vice president level at that company. And then he decided to go to law school, and he's now a patent attorney.
Kidding? No kidding.
No, he's a great guy. I like both of my partners, but we haven't tried to do another business together.
No, yeah. Well, and that's a good ending too, because too many times, look, I was in a failed partnership that broke up around 2010. And it was one of those giant mistakes that we were equal partners, but it was me and my wife and another couple, and ultimately we didn't see eye to eye on how to run the business, and we are still not friends as a result of that, and that's a shame, right?
It is a shame.
I'm glad that you guys we were very close friends before that, but we made some of the classic mistakes, and you guys were smarter than us when you set it up. So So get us from that time frame when you exited in 98 to when you joined Texas Engineering Systems.
Well, Texas Engineering Systems had 3 partners, and they were tenants in my executive suites.
Oh, really?
They were, and we got to know each other a little bit, and they got to know me. And of course, they'd come in tenancy when I was with the other partnership, and they perceived that we were very successful. They did not have somebody in their group with my kind of expertise in business and finance, and so we came to an agreement, and I joined their 3 partners as partner number 4.
Now, was it then 25, 25, 25, 25?
It's the only way we do it.
Excellent. All right. And what year was that? That was
within a few months of splitting out of the other partnership. Same year, 1998.
Oh, no kidding. So, man, all right. Right back in business, baby.
Right back in business. And so the first thing that I did, they were in a single location. And this was a software distribution company in 3-dimensional design software. And the partners that I had, one was very good in sales, but all 3 of them had come out of the finite element analysis or the design industry. And one of them was a PE. One of them was MIT trained. One of them was University of Maryland trained in FEA, and he was acknowledged to be an expert in finite element analysis. And then we had a guy that could, sell ice to Eskimos.
What you were missing, or what they were missing at that point, was a business guy.
They were missing the business guy. So it was a good addition, I felt, and I think the success we had shows that. But we immediately, we were selling a 3-dimensional design software called SolidWorks. And SolidWorks now is quite well known, but this was near the start of SolidWorks when they were still building their dealer network. And there were other competing dealers in the states that we had. We were in Dallas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Missouri. So we had a good, part of the central, southwest United States. But we also could do deals occasionally in other areas, and did. So the first deal was with a large oil and gas company in Houston, and a single check was $500,000.
Wow!
So we were off to the races from the beginning.
Doesn't take long to build up some money that way.
But we knew, and everybody agreed, that if you want to grow fast, you always seek the well-heeled corporate customers and try to do the bigger deals. And we were very good at putting together some big software deals. If you looked at our customer list, it was blue chip in terms of the kind of people we were doing business with. And this is something that I also learned from my time at Com 2000 Plus, when we were also dealing with the big well-heeled customers. They pay the best. You can certainly do deals with other companies, but to get a good basis for growth and value, make sure that you've got a lot of the blue chip companies on your customer rolls. And we did. And so we also grew fast. We didn't win a Dallas 100, but we did get on the Fast Tech 50 and the Pacesetter list again. And that was nice.
Excellent. So let's kind of fast forward to then 2010 and talk about your exit and your exit strategy. So were you guys intentional about having an exit strategy, or did, as we say, an opportunity fall in your laps?
Well, we had grown a value-added reseller that was quite well known in the industry and had a value. And we did not have any intention of exiting when we did. None whatsoever.
So what made you decide to exit?
We got approached several times by someone else in our industry that was very interested in having the territory that we had, and also, already had, was already a reseller in all the software that we had, and just wanted to enlarge their footprint. And we got an offer that was really hard to turn down. And the offer, we insisted, would be a 60-day close, no due diligence,
what?
All cash type offer.
60 days. 60 days, no due diligence, all cash. Good Lord.
Yeah, but think about it. I mean, this guy already knew the industry. He's in it already. We're doing the same things. We've got employees that do the same things that this guy did. We've got multiple offices, because at this point we had 9 offices in the areas that we covered, and we had a really good footprint. So yeah, it sounds amazing, but really, what kind of due diligence did he need to do?
Well, I mean, we'll talk about that in just a second, because I want to come back to that. But
yeah, no debt.
60 days. Did they stick to that timeline?
Oh yeah, we closed. Okay, the offer was made in October. We closed it by the end of the year.
No kidding. All right. Well, it was made in October, unless it was made October 31st. Then it was a little more than 60 days.
No, I don't remember exactly what date it was made in October, but certainly we were well within the deadlines.
All right. So you got this offer. You guys agreed to it. It was more than what it was, enough to get your attention, probably more than what you thought the business might have been worth at the time, enough to make you all want to be motivated to go. So did you get together a team for the transition? I mean, did you hire an attorney? Of course, I know your finance background, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I mean, did you hire any help, any guns to help you through this, or were you all just doing this all?
No, we just did this. We didn't need an attorney. We were capable of, looking through the acquisition agreement and fleshing it out. We just did it and closed it.
Wow. Now, and you'd been through another prior exit, so you had at least some knowledge of how these things work and how that works. And genuinely no due diligence. They agreed.
No, I mean, we gave them information, of course, but yeah. No, they weren't in here pulling records or testing things or anything like that. It was just here it is.
Did you guys have audited financial statements?
We did not.
Okay, so they were trusting that they were accurate. That's a high degree of trust. But this was a friendly buyer, right? I mean, it was a friendly buyer. He didn't really care what we'd done in the past, because he wasn't really buying what we'd done in the past. He was buying our employees. He was buying our customers. That was it. Well, and that, I mean, honestly, Tom, you said a mouthful there. A lot of people value their business based on what they've done, but buyers all value businesses based on whatever their motivation is, right? This guy apparently he wanted to grow. He knew what he could do with your people, with your customers, right? And that was his motivation.
And here we are. We're 12 years past the acquisition. He still owns it.
Really?
Still got most of our employees there.
Really?
I think he kept most of the customers, from what I understand. So it's all working just like we designed it.
Wow. Now, all right. So just based on the very limited due diligence, I mean, you provided them records. It wasn't the kind of due diligence examination that I know you've seen with many of your B2B CFO clients. I mean, that's more like a proctoral exam, right?
It can be.
But you did that, and then they closed at the value you guys agreed to,
Yes.
in an all cash deal.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Now, we had a few sweeteners in there too.
Did you really?
Yeah, we had a few sweeteners in there. We had one line of business that was newer to us and was going to be a little newer to them, and we weren't sure exactly how it was going to operate, for the next couple of years for them. And so we had a little sweetener in there. Didn't end up earning much on it, but it was really the only uncertainty in the deal.
Right. Well, but you were happy with what you got at close. And I know people have heard me say this on these interviews before. My message always to business owners who are going to sell, you can certainly make money on earnouts, but if you're not happy with the amount of money that you get at closing, then don't do the deal. As if you're never going to get another dollar.
Well,
right.
Well, we didn't have any seller loans or anything, obviously, but if there had been, seller loans or something, you always want a clawback, but then there's always the danger that the business would be wrecked.
Yep. Well, that's it. And so that's awesome. Now, you already mentioned that many of the employees are still there. How did they react when you delivered the news that, hey, we sold the company yesterday?
Well, they were familiar with the buyer.
Okay.
The buyer did a really good job of meeting with the employees and transitioning. And in some ways, because this was a bigger organization, they ended up in a better place than they were with us.
That's awesome. I've done transactions like that where I've sold to bigger companies, and I'm very gratified that, here we are. Gosh, I sold to a big publicly traded company back in the late 90s, a distribution company owned, and many of my employees, who were probably the better trained employees of all they did a bunch of acquisitions, but many of those people went on to take very high ranking roles in the organization for years and retired from a long career with that company. And that, that's very gratifying, isn't it? When you see your people, stick around for a long time.
Well, it is. Really, if you want to get down to it, I was the only guy that was out.
Really?
They didn't need a CFO. They had a CFO. Both of my partners joined their organization.
And they stayed on long term?
One is still there, and one stayed on for a while, but ultimately left. But I think it was a good deal for everybody.
That is awesome. Look, we're up against a break here. We're talking with Tom Washington, a member of the Double 17% Club. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Every business will eventually transition, some internally to employees and managers, and some externally to third-party buyers. Mastery Partners equips business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their businesses on their terms using our 4-step process. We start with a snapshot of where your business is today. Then we help you understand where you want to be and design a custom strategy to get you there. Next, we help you execute that strategy with the assistance of our amazing resource network. And ultimately, you'll be able to transition your business on your terms. What are you waiting for? More time? More revenue? If you want to maximize your business value, it takes time. Now is that time. Get started today by checking us out at www.masterypartners.com or email us at info@masterypartners.com to learn more.
We're back with Tom Washington, a business owner who successfully exited as a partnership in '98 and sold his business again in a different business in 2010, making him a member of the 17% Club. But now you understand my comment about why this is a little bit different story. Tom, I know in your business now, you help business owners that are getting ready to exit their business. How frequent is a story like this 60-day close, no due diligence, all cash deal. How often do you hear stories like that?
Hardly ever.
Thank you. That's the answer that I was looking for. Because if you say a bunch of them, I'm going to go, okay, you and I are going to have to talk a little bit further. But yeah, you probably appreciated then, but even more now working with lots of businesses, what a rarity that is. And that's why, when we first talked about doing this podcast, you said, I'm not sure you want me to share this story. And I said, no, this is like every other story. It's unique. But I wanted to get this story out because it can happen, right? I mean, it's like winning the lottery, but it can happen. I just heard the other day on the radio that somebody who bought a lottery ticket in Grapevine won, several $1 million. I went, dang it, I should have bought a lottery ticket that day, right? But it does happen, and so transactions, every one of them sort of takes on a life of its own. So let's get back to kind of the lessons that you've learned and things that we can offer to the business owners in our audience. What did you learn going through either one of these processes?
I learned that exits are never on your timing.
Mm-hmm.
Neither exit was really planned or timed from a long-term standpoint. I believe that preparation for an exit is vital. Now, I will say that in the case of both exits, we kept a very, very clean set of books, as you might imagine. Our business was well organized. Wasn't necessarily well documented, but everybody that was involved in the business knew their jobs, and we had a lot of employees that have been with us for a long time, and that can be a help because they know their jobs. It can also hurt you a little bit because that means you're probably near the top of the pay scales in those particular duties. We didn't operate businesses with a lot of debt. Neither business carried debt, and you've got a lot of flexibility when you operate with great liquidity, and not every business does that. A lot of business owners feel like the greater the leverage, the better your return, and don't really know the risk that they're taking with that level of leverage. So you got to get that right.
Yes, no doubt. And yeah, that's you hit on several really good points there. One that I wanted to be sure that we don't gloss over, and that's running good, clean financial statements. I mean, small businesses, startup businesses are notorious for terrible books. And I always tell our clients, you and I do similar things in preparing. I mean, there's a tiny overlap in what we do, but we do similar things in working with our clients. I always tell our clients, you want to have your books presented in a way that a buyer would be interested in looking at it, right? So do your books. They've got to be good and accurate, but it's got to be easily understood and something that from the buyer's perspective. Do you agree with that?
Not totally.
Okay.
The reason I don't is because you've got to know where your profit comes from, and I think that books are better organized so that your lines of business have clear financial statements, so that you understand what that line of business contributes to your gross margin and how your overhead supports each line of business. I had a customer in B2B CFO early on when I started. It was a $130 million company, been around for 30 years. Founder had been involved and still kind of was, but he was off, had been away from the business for 4 years because he was in his 80s, and he'd put a president in that slowly, maybe not too slowly, ran the company into the ground. And so I was brought in July of a certain year by a banker, And that banker said, look, I'm going to have to close this company down soon if you can't fix it, because they went from 130 million in sales the prior year, and halfway through the year they've got 20 million, and the company's hemorrhaging cash and earnings and everything else. Help, you need to help me here. And they had scheduled a meeting 2 weeks from when I walked in to have a discussion with the bank on what their future was. And so I did, do a line of business margin analysis, and I found that there was a line of business that was dragging the business down. So my recommendation was to close that line of business, cut overhead, lay off excess employees, and they had a lot of equipment that had leverage on it and debt on it that had been placed to finance the negative cash flow over several years. And so we needed to sell a whole bunch of equipment and retire debt. Took that to the bank. Bank said, okay, this looks like it might work, but we'll give you till the end of the quarter to prove it out. Went to work immediately.
The first week of the quarter that you had this conversation?
No, this was actually, we were meeting the third week of the first month.
Yeah, okay.
So we had a little bit of time, but not a lot of time.
60, 70 days, right?
Yeah, about that. The controller looked a little shaky, so we got a new controller. Found a gentleman inside the company that looked like a good CFO candidate to train, and we told the founder to go on vacation and stay there, and we brought his son in to work with, who was a little younger. And by the end of the third quarter, the company had increased sales up to about 56 million. We had a small profit for the third quarter. We'd done the things that we said we'd do. The bank gave us another quarter to go. And by the end of that fourth quarter, they got it up to 65 million, and they broke even for the year. So we're accelerating the cash flow and the earnings. We budgeted the company for the first time in their history, over 30 years, $80 million top line. By the middle of the following year, they were outperforming the budget profitably, and the bank renewed their lines and cut the rate.
Wow. So we're gonna when they redo your business card at B2B, it's not fractional CFO, it's magician. So, well, but all right. So I want to back up. You said you didn't agree totally, but when I say I want to see financial statements from the perspective of a buyer, that means that I want to be able to see where the profitability is. I don't want it hidden. I don't want to slim it down to be, less than that's usable, but I want to know where our margins are. I want to be able to see financial statements on customers, on lines of business, because that's the only way. If you have that information, that's the only way you can make those kind of critical decisions. And if you don't have that, I'll give you a similar example. In 1997, bought a company in Chicago. It was $33 million top line revenue, but losing $5 million a year. And the first thing I did when I walked in the door, of course, I got a pretty good deal on it, right? First thing I did when I walked in the door was I want a profitability analysis on our top 50 customers, right? I want to see where we're making our money. And we were distributing products to big hospitals and health facilities and whatnot. Well, what I learned was that there were about 5 customers that were causing the problem. We were way underwater with those guys. And that's where most of our loss came from. So I called the salespeople together who were responsible for those 5 accounts. And I showed them the financial statements. And I said, okay, here's the deal. Either you're going alone or I'm going with you to these customers. And we are either A, renegotiating the deal, or B, telling them we're breaking the contract and they're welcome to go elsewhere. They nearly all had heart attacks, right? Oh, you're killing me, boss. And yeah, well, you're not making any money on this because we're underwater on all of these accounts. And so we went and visited all 5 of those customers. 2 of them left us. And the other 3 agree. I wasn't going to gig them. I said, all I need to do, I'm sharing my financials with you. All I need to do is get you to a break-even point. I'm happy to deliver the products here and not make any money for the duration of this contract, but I can't do it at where we sit right now. And 3 of them actually agreed to that. Well, what happened was we went from a $33 million business to a $28 million business. The $33 million business losing $5 million a year, the $28 million business making $1 million a year. That was that was not something, a big pride point, because a $28 million business with $1 million to the bottom line is just, it's anemic. But turning it around, but you can't do that unless you have that information. So I think you and I are saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think we are too.
Direction. Yeah, from kind of a different direction there. So in these transactions, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Well, we certainly weren't ready to leave, but in the 12 years since, I've had a different kind of life than I would have had we stayed with that business and, been looking to sell now or something like that. The cards fall where they may. I think being able to do this with B2B CFO for the last 5 years has certainly been rewarding, and would not have had that opportunity if I was still operating these separate businesses.
You said that you were kind of the odd man out. They didn't need a CFO, so you were the guy that took it and left. Well, did you have any idea of what you were going to do after the sale?
Not a bit.
Not a bit. Now,
what I did do is I went out and formed a real estate development company with another partner.
Well, of course you did.
Of course I did. And so we put
Was he also a tenant of yours prior?
No, he's a guy I knew through politics. I'm very active in politics in this area.
Oh, excellent.
I served as the state treasurer for the State Republican Party of Texas for a couple of years, and served as an officer for 7. This, of course, was while I was still engaged with the business we sold. Or no, actually, yeah, there was about a 1-year overlap.
Okay. And
anyways. So put together a great development deal over in Tyler. Found 20 acres. We got architectural design for 5-story apartments for student housing for the universities there in Tyler. We did all the land planning. We planned all the utilities. Got it to the point where you could literally pull a building permit, but we could not finance it in Tyler. It was a $65 million project. And, the banks in Tyler, there's only 1 or 2 that could do a project of that size. And the big banks weren't interested in going to Tyler and looking at real estate deals.
Really? I'm surprised at that.
So, I'd always wanted, I'd been a CFO in the real estate development world in the 80s. And so I've always had the real estate bug. And so I really wanted to try this on my own. And maybe this was too ambitious a project, but I didn't want any small stuff. And the project really looked really good. And we tried to get the universities to put a master lease on it, which would have allowed us to get the financing easily, but we couldn't persuade them to take that step. And there were some other reasons why they didn't. It had nothing to do with us.
Right.
So I walked away from that, and then I ran for political office in 2013.
Really?
I ran in Denton County to be a JP, Justice of the Peace.
Yeah.
So that'd be kind of fun to serve as a judge. And lost by 200 votes out of 4,500.
Oh, man. Wish I'd known.
Just trying all the stuff on my bucket list.
That's right. Okay. Did that. Awesome. Well, you've already mentioned, and we've mentioned here that now you're a partner at B2B CFO. We've actually had other partners from B2B CFO just a couple of weeks ago. We had Tamara Jones on to talk about KPIs and that kind of thing. So tell us, what's your take on B2B CFO?
B2B CFO has a lot of talented people there. We're not really necessarily CFOs in the vein that people think of CFOs. We're more of strategic business advisors, where we're looking at your whole business and trying to identify the barriers that are keeping you from meeting your goals, and helping you with getting rid of those barriers and conquering them so that you can get your business back on track. And I find that to be very satisfying, helping other business owners meet their dreams.
And that's kind of fun, right? I mean, you see the light bulbs go off. You're helping folks enjoy some of the success that you've enjoyed before. That to me is one of the most gratifying things, right?
It is, and it seems like based on the experience now, which is heck at this point over 40 years, including time at Arthur Andersen and Coopers and Lybrand, it seems like I can see pretty clearly when I look at a business what needs to be done next.
Awesome. And I know you do great work with your clients at B2B CFO. Hey, before we go, though, I found out a few things about you, very interesting, while I was researching to do this podcast. I found out that you're the treasurer of the National Society of Washington Family Descendants. You have to tell us about that.
Well, it's one of the things I do from a volunteer standpoint. So if I don't have enough to do at B2B CFO, I've got volunteer work on the side that I do, and that's one of them. But there's a National Society of Washington Family Descendants formed in 1954. Everybody that's a member is a registered descendant of the Washington family, and we're talking about the Washington family that includes George Washington, and in my case, Chief Justice John Marshall of the Supreme Court as well.
No kidding.
And these registered descendants, right at this point, there's 1,355 of us over the time of this society. It's a 501c3. We actually put together funds, and we support a lot of other charities through our association in the course of what we do. We have annual reunion meetings, mostly on the East Coast, places that Washington frequented, and we're like one big kind of Washington family. You
guys have big family reunions at Mount Vernon?
Well, our annual reunion meeting last year was at Mount Vernon. They're very accommodating to us. We've had other Mount Vernon meetings, but we don't meet there every year. We've met at Pittsburgh and Boston and New York City. We had a dinner up in the tavern in New York City where Washington said farewell to his officers. It's still there. In fact, the original room is still there.
No kidding.
So we are going to Charleston this year, and of course we're all big history buffs, as you might imagine, mostly American history, and we've got some distinguished people in our society. Some of the people have done some great things themselves.
Absolutely. So Charleston, I love that. My wife and I have been married for 31 years, right around the time this podcast comes out. And we spent part of our honeymoon in Charleston and we stayed at the Middleton Plantation.
Oh, that's nice.
And
very
yeah,
nice.
It was awesome. And one of the events that we went to, we were there. There was a conference going on at the same time. You like how I multitask? Hey, honey, we're getting married. Let's go to this conference. But she knew the people, and it was really more of a party for us than anything else. And one of the things we did was a cruise, because the event started on the anniversary of the bombing of Fort Sumter, which was the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And
actually, the Civil War.
Oh, the Civil War. Yeah, I'm sorry, the Civil War. Yes, getting my wars mixed up here. And so it was kind of fun, the history. I'm a big history buff. Well, I have to know what how are you related to George Washington? I mean, you don't have to give me the whole.
Well, no,
it's you like
it's
his
really
sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, whatever.
No, it's really simple. I'm directly descended from George Washington's brother, John Augustine, whom he called Jack, and was one of his favorite brothers. And we have the same father, same mother. I'm descended from Augustine Washington and Mary Ball, who were also George Washington's mother through his brother, John Augustine. I pick up another relationship to Justice John Marshall because my grandmother on my father's side was his great-granddaughter.
No kidding.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix in my particular line of Marshall and Washington and a few other things. But it's nice. It's nice having the connection. It's nice going back that far and knowing who your relatives are. But it also gives me a personal connection. I mean, I feel personally connected to the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and all the things that the founders went through, even though, of course, I wasn't there, just because of the family connection.
Yep.
It might interest you to know that the Washingtons only got here accidentally.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The Washingtons all came from John Augustine Washington, the immigrant, who came over as a teenager as an assistant master on a trading sloop. And they bought furniture from England, and they traded it with the settlers along the Potomac in return for tobacco. They wrecked at the mouth of the Potomac. And the master and the assistant master, who was John Augustine Washington, had a little fight over who was at fault in Admiralty Court. He had to stay over here because he was marooned, and he was thrown in jail because he was accused. Lieutenant Colonel Nathaniel Pope, who was one of the plantation owners that he traded with, stood his bail in beaver skins to get him out, and then he had to live with the Popes until the trial came around. He was judged innocent at the trial, but he met Ann Pope and got married and stayed in the New World. So without that mishap, the Washingtons wouldn't probably be here.
Oh my gosh, what a great story. Those are the kind of stories that get lost to history unless you have an opportunity to hear something like that. We could talk about that subject all day. Thank you for sharing all that information about your history and the Washington family. I am a history buff. I'm just a nut. I love those things. My youngest daughter, she's in college now, but for her senior trip, it was during COVID. She graduated high school, which was a terrible time for a kid to graduate high school. But you'll appreciate this. We did kind of the Great American Tour because I grew up in Charlotte. I was born in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
So one of the trivia questions when I'm together with folks is I am a citizen of the United States, but I was not born in a state. Where was I born? And so most people guess, a military base or one of the U.S. territories, or Puerto Rico.
Good guesses.
Yep. I was born in the District of Columbia. And at Columbia Hospital for Women, which doesn't exist anymore. But my parents lived in Annandale, Virginia, and my grandparents in Springfield. And so, I love history. We've been to DC with the family and kind of done the highlights tour because I spent every summer there. But for my daughter's high school graduation, she wanted to do kind of the Great American History Tour. So we flew into Charlotte, went and stayed in Asheville to go to the Vanderbilt House, which of course is a different part of history. But then we drove up the Blue Ridge Parkway all the way to Monticello. And of course, the road between Monticello and Mount Vernon, that's kind of the presidential highway. There are like 4 or 5, presidential homes all along that area. And then we went down to Colonial Williamsburg and kind of rounded out kind of this great history tour. And she loved that as much as I did. So.
Well, I'm a native of Virginia.
Oh, are you? But
I was actually born in Richmond.
Virginia is for lovers, don't you?
It is. lived for a time in both Richmond and Woodbridge. The family, of course, is from the Alexandria area. One of my ancestors is the last owner of Mount Vernon, who is John Augustine Washington III, and he sold Mount Vernon to the Mount Vernon Ladies Association in 1857, and then moved the family over into what is now West Virginia. But that sale fortunately happened prior to the Civil War. Otherwise, I feel certain that the mansion would have been confiscated, much as Robert E. Lee's mansion was confiscated by President Lincoln right there in Arlington, across the river from Washington, D.C.
Yep. Wow. Great history lessons here. More than we bargained for today. Well, I'm going to ask you one last business question with all your experience. I'm going to ask you to boil it into one thing. This podcast is all about maximizing business value. What is the one most important thing that you recommend business owners do to build long-term sustainable value in their business?
Make sure you have plenty of liquidity in the business. Cash is king. And don't strap yourself too much keep cash reserves, because there will always be something that comes along that if you don't have those reserves, you wish you did. Now, bankers will lend money, but don't take too much.
Yes, they will. I always say that bankers will lend money to you in direct proportion to the amount that you don't need it. So liquidity is important. The number one reason small businesses fail is they run out of cash. And so that is great advice. But I have to ask you my bonus question too. Everybody listens to this point. Tom, what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years?
Trouble. Okay, That's interesting. Trouble.
Oh, you're thinking of, gosh, it could be this, it could be that.
Well, probably my curiosity. I'm always curious, and it actually helps me a lot in what I do, but it can get you into trouble too. Yes, sometimes it can. When you ask, I'm like you. I ask a lot of. I'm just naturally curious. I want to know, right? And so I just ask lots and lots and lots of questions. And so it hasn't got me into too much trouble, but perhaps sometimes I come across as being a little nosy, right? So no, I'm just fascinated by the information. So how can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you? Well, I can be reached at Tom Washington at b2bcfo.com by email. My phone number is 972-849-6947. And I'd be happy to speak with you. The way we engage is to meet, kind of do a in-depth review on your business and present a plan. And we do that all without charge on our own time. Awesome. That is awesome. Tom, you've been a great guest. We've wandered around a lot of different places here today, but great business information and some historical information to boot. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. You're welcome. Thank you, Tom. You can find Tom Washington at B2B. It's B2bcfo.com or on LinkedIn. And of course, you can always reach out to me and I will be happy to make a warm introduction to my friend, Tom Washington. A descendant of George Washington, or part of the Washington family. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast so you'll know every time we have a new episode. Got a little secret for you. If you follow us, then you'll find out we actually drop these episodes before we promote them, and you'll be kind of the earlier listener to the next podcast. By the way, if you know someone who has successfully exited a business, or if you have yourself and therefore a member of the 17% Club, we'd love to interview you on this podcast. Reach out to me and let's schedule a conversation.
So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you that it's never too early to start planning your own ideal exit while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.